Hey guys, welcome. Super excited to have you here. This is day one of a 3-day part challenge. I'm going to share with you how you can start selling like crazy on Etsy and how you can actually start earning your first $10,000, even though it might feel far-fetched right now. I'm going to share with you some mindset shifts you need to start having, along as important insights so you can understand what you might have been doing wrong along the way. But before we do that, make sure that you check your email in the description of this video, as I have included a Notion template to help you specifically if you haven't set up your Etsy store yet. This is just simple prompts that you will find and a simple checklist that you can go through to help you along the way. So chances are, if you are attending this 3-day challenge, you're wanting to start making money online and you might be dabbling between different side hustles. You heard that Etsy is very beginner friendly, but for whatever reason, you are not getting consistent sales or you are overwhelmed with getting started. You also are applying everything that you're learning, but you can't seem to get to $10,000 a month. And you're really starting to wonder if Etsy's too saturated. Trust me, I've been there. So, needless to say, first and foremost, it's important to understand that this is not a do nothing and make money online. And nothing is, by the way. You have to put in the work and you have to be consistent through your journey. And I'm just as guilty as everybody else, especially when I got started. I used to jump from one shiny object to the other. And it's not till I started really focusing on e-commerce that I started seeing results. So it's important to take action so you can make progress. And it's also important to treat your side hustle as an actual business. And that shift can take a while for some folks, but it's important for you to have that shift, right? So I'm going to explain why I love to sell on Etsy, as well as pointing out some of the pros and cons of other side hustles, just so we can put at rest this idea that Etsy's is saturated. And I'm going to share a specific example. Etsy's is so beginner friendly. First and foremost, because you don't need a website. So take out the knowledge of having to build a website. And even though now you can do with AI, yada, yada, you don't need to have a website. It's literally 20 cents a listing. And then now you have to pay $15 fee when starting up your account. This is something that they just rolled out, and they're simply doing that because they're trying to prevent people opening spam accounts. So it's a great way to understand market demand without going into debt. And never in history have we had this opportunity to test ideas without putting a lot of capital up front, right? So personally, the other reason why I love Etsy is because literally I can make sales wherever I have Wi-Fi. And I love to travel. I've been traveling for a really long time. I like the ability to be able to work from anywhere, not be tied to a factory, not be tied to having to receive products and review them like with Amazon or TikTok affiliate. I like to have a business that allows me to sell without first having money tied up in inventory, without having to spend money in advertising, and without having products on hand, right? So this is my personal I like this flexibility, right? People are different and people have different lifestyle, but this is what has worked for me. Needless to say as well, it's important to remember that opening a brick and mortar, you need to have substantial investment. It costs like 6 figures plus to up to 2 million to open a small restaurant. So it's important to understand and have insights about the fact that starting on Etsy is extremely beginner friendly, and also it doesn't have the financial risk of opening a brick and mortar, right? Like a nail shop or whatever that is, right? And never in history have we had this opportunity. So here are the pros and cons of Etsy versus Shopify versus affiliate marketing, so we can put it at rest once and for all. First and foremost, Etsy, like I've mentioned, has a very low barrier entry cost, 20 cents a listing and $15 one-time fee. You don't need to spend money in advertising, none of that, right? You don't need to have a website. You don't need to have branding. You can have a very simple shop front when getting started. You don't need to be a digital marketing whiz because Etsy's algorithm actually does all the work for you. And you don't need to have any inventory, and you can sell internationally. So with Shopify, yes, you have the revenue potential of making 7 figures more. You also have the ability of having your own email list, and you have the ability of building a brand. With affiliate, you're promoting other people's product and there's no customer service. But now let's talk about the cons. So with affiliate, whether it's Amazon affiliate or TikTok affiliate, you do need to publish a lot of social media content in order to get traction. I know from friends who are doing it, for instance, for Amazon, in order for them to make $5,000, they've had to publish 300 product reviews. Now with TikTok Shop, it might be less, but you still need to be uploading a lot of different videos and testing a lot of different videos to see what's actually going to start bringing you revenue. You need to actually have the product on hand to do a review, or you need to have editing shops with either AI or editing on your own. And not all products are high commission. And then on top of it, you're never going to have access to like an actually list you're not building a business database, right? Because you're not building a list of actual customers. It all relies on your time of making those videos, right? With a Shopify store, you are building a tangible business asset, right? However, you need to spend money in advertising, so you do need more capital. You need to also have a good website. You need to understand what kind of landing page is going to help you convert. You need to create brand authority because folks are coming on your website not knowing who you are. So branding is actually very important when it comes to Shopify. And you need to drive traffic. You can also have your ad account getting suspended, whether on Facebook, whether TikTok, etc. So with Shopify, not only do you need to have an understanding of what products are going to do well for you, but you also need to have capital to get started. Versus Etsy, for me, it's the perfect testing tool, the best way to get started. Because again, you don't have to have a website and you don't need to have too many items in place in order to start getting results, right? So the one con, however, is that the Etsy bots are more aggressive. It's important for you to not do any IP infringements, and you can have your account getting banned for no reason. You just have to make sure, especially if you haven't had any like IP infringement, to reach out to them and you will get your account back. It just depends on how long that might take, right? And I would say the con is it's harder to get customers' emails, but it's still doable. You can still get customers' emails. There's way, you can use Everbee, there's ways. So needless to say, I think it's important for you to have a full broad understanding of what each of these different business models when it comes to e-commerce for you to decide what works for you. My personal favorite is Etsy, and I'm sure it's yours too because you're here. Another thing that's important to understand is that Etsy is actually a search engine. There's around 500 million people who visit Etsy every month, and there's 97.3 active buyers on Etsy. So, which is why it's so beginner friendly, especially when you start out, because look at it as a podium for you to test different products and get data in real time as to what's going to work and what's not going to work. Where else are you going to find that audience without you having to do a video? Like, it's very simple. All you have to do is create your product listing. Also, it's important to note that Etsy's fourth as far as website rank. It's after Amazon, eBay, and Walmart. So it's actually higher than Target, which tells you this is a platform where people go and shop. However, as a marketplace and as a platform, obviously the behaviors of your consumers are very different than anywhere else. So needless to say, the problem is not Etsy. Etsy wants you to get sales. That's how it makes money as a business, right? So Etsy is a search engine. Look at it that way. And it caters to the needs of its customers. You just need to understand what to put in front of these customers in order to start getting traction. And so overall, customers trust Etsy, which is why you don't need to have a brand. And it's also why Etsy bots are so proactive, because they want to ensure that their brand legitimacy is kept. They want to make sure that people continue trusting Etsy. So hence, they want to ensure that whomever comes into their platform is a legitimate business. So reviews don't matter because people trust Etsy. You don't need to have your family buy your products when starting out, right? Don't believe anything else. So now let's break down these famous Etsy fees and put that at rest once and for all, right? So selling, let's say, a simple digital download product, let's say that it's $5 and it's sold for $5. Transaction fees overall for Etsy are around 9%. So you have 6.5% plus a 3% processing fee, which, by the way, you still have fees when you're selling on Amazon or Shopify or TikTok, along as having credit processing fee. Any credit card has processing fee, whether you actually buy something at a retail store, at a brick and mortar, etc. So that's just part of having a business. Now, your profit would be 4.53, which is an amazing profit. You need to get 7 sales a day in order to make $1,000, right? So 227 sales in 30 days in order to make $1,000 in profit per month. Then let's say that you're selling jewelry, print on demand jewelry, again, with zero advertising. I'm not factoring advertising. I'm also not factoring the 20 cents fee that you pay once you upload the product. But I just wanted to focus on the fees. Essentially, same. If you're selling a product for $49, let's say it's an outprint, print on demand jewelry item, or any other products that are okay with Etsy, you can make as much as $31 in profit, right? So it would require you to have 5 sales per day in order for you to make $4,695 in profit, right? So now I know what you're going to say next. Well, I can't even get to 5 sales a day. Not to worry. Part of the issue is because there's a bunch of distraction that come in the way. And so instead of focusing your energy where it all matters, often I notice newer sellers are spending their energy in different places and hence not working in what actually is going to push the needle. So either thinking that they need to have a niche store, they need to know their niche when they start, which that couldn't be further away from the truth, because when you're starting, you don't have any data, you don't understand what's going to work versus what doesn't work. And again, like I said, when you start selling on Etsy, you can start selling as a generic brand. It does not matter. You can always change that later. It's not like you're building a website, right? You also don't need to drive traffic when you're starting out because you are leveraging Etsy's already existing customer base. You also don't need to spend hours having perfect SEO. Yes, keywords help bring traffic by all means. However, what I've noticed is that spending too much time having perfect SEO doesn't address the elephant in the room, and I'm going to talk more about that. You don't need to get reviews to get sales because, like we talked about, Etsy is a trusted marketplace, and you don't need to spend hours spending thousands of listings, right? Like, it is a necessary evil when getting started. You need to upload more listings because you need to have data. However, as you get better at your craft of understanding what people want and putting that in front of them, you don't. You don't need to spend all this time uploading listings, right? And you also don't need to only go after low competition keywords. That's also something that is important to realize. So overall, the problem is that Etsy is maturing. And so you might be applying outdated tactics and you might not understand how the Etsy algorithm works. Overall, it feels harder to get views and sales, and you're not understanding why. So what happens out of panic is that most start feeling frustrated. They start uploading products with no strategy. They start lowering the product price out of desperation. They think that that's going to help them get more sales because they see other sellers doing it. When in reality, that has nothing to do with whether or not your customer is going to purchase your product, right? Because you might think, okay, well, this other seller is selling it for less than I am, so then I should decrease my price. And while that is a more advanced strategy, when you are starting out, it's actually doing you a disservice. You also think that the issue is traffic because you're not getting views. So you're like, okay, I'm not getting views, so I need to bring more traffic to my listing. And again, that's also doing you a disservice because you don't have the craft yet of knowing what the perfect listing and what an irresistible listing is. And so you're actually losing money along the way. And so you start thinking overall that Etsy's the problem and you give up, when in reality, the problem is your listing. That's the elephant in the room, right? And so Etsy's not the problem, guys. Like this store right here started this year and they've already made $23,000 selling print on demand phone cases. They're selling it for $29. So needless to say, here's proof for you that it's not saturated. And there's still plenty of opportunities. There's still plenty of opportunities on Etsy. And by the way, like people have been saying that Etsy saturated since I started. And this is why I don't like to hang out in these Etsy handmade groups or Reddit groups where everyone is just so negative. And instead of addressing the elephant in the room, is addressing how customers are evolving, how Etsy's evolving, they just like to complain, complain, complain. And this is why I avoid these groups like the plague. Also, needless to say, you don't need to be a design guru to be successful either. There's a lot of tools available these days that make it really easy for us to design something very minimalistic. Minimalistic designs tend to outperform very complicated design. This is something that I have tested and seen over and over. And some of my best students don't necessarily have very intricate designs. They have designs that they easily created on Canva. So overall, why is that, you might think? Well, because what matters are the type of emotions that you get out of your customers, right? So Sarah Last Nerve, oh, look, it's on fire. It's funny. It gets an emotion out of your customers, right? Which is why this particular candle is doing so well and has generated $263,000 in sales. So you might be wondering, okay, well, great. So why am I not getting any sales? Well, because you are lost in the sea of option. And when you're lost in the sea of option, there's no traffic. And we need to discuss how you're going to fix that. And it's not with so the best SEO in the world is not necessarily going to fix that problem, because I've noticed majority of the time is that folks copy each other. So when you do a key search for Mother's Day, let's say, you end up kind of finding repetitive gifts. Nothing really sticks out. And family niches tend to be a lot harder overall, right? Because everybody's going after those niches and it can be very overwhelming when you are getting started to think as to how you're going to differentiate yourself, right? The same happens here, like within the nurse niche, right? So a lot of different items are very similar from one another. And let's face it, customers are lazy. They're not going to go down 9 pages down to find your listing. And so now you might be like, well, it's Etsy's algorithm that's to blame. And it's not. I'll talk more about that. But what happens overall is that people copy each other and they don't have a strategy. They see a bestseller, they copy it, or they come up with an idea without having any data. They put things with no strategy and without looking at any data. And they think that keywords are their holy grail. Keywords tell one story. The story is search, right? Overall, like keywords tell you Mother's Day. Okay, this people are highly searching for it because Mother's Day is around the corner, or Christmas or whatever that is. But that's only one part of the story. There's the other part that's missing. So overall, folks you might be looking at data, but you're not understanding customers' behavior. So look at it as almost being blindfolded, if you will, right? You're just only looking at one part of the data, which is keywords, without understanding the other ingredients that are needed in order to get those sales. So I'm going to reveal one of my secret formula to selling crazy on Etsy. And by the way, every day throughout the challenge, I'm going to share a different secret. Today, overall, what I want to focus our time and energy is understanding how to serve the Etsy algorithm, right? So how to leverage Etsy's organic traffic and already existing customer base in order to start getting traction. And part of that is understanding what people are looking for. So once you understand the Etsy algorithm, and I'm going to talk about it in just a second, I'm going to explain to you some of the mechanics and the feedback loop that takes place. You are already ahead of the game because you're understanding what people are into and not into, right? So Etsy actually has a very sophisticated algorithm, just like Facebook and TikTok, right? And like I've mentioned, it's in the business of getting you sales. So overall, every time you publish a listing, it's going obviously to look at some of the key elements, which are some of the keywords that you've used or tags. And again, having a minimal viable product is enough for you to start testing whether or not your product has potential, right? Especially when starting out and putting ideas out there. So having just a few keywords that represent what the gift is about is enough when getting started. So overall, what happens is when you publish a listing, Etsy is going to get data as to not only it already has data on search behaviors, which are the keywords that people are using to search different products, but they're also going to start having data on the shopper's behavior towards your listing. So is it getting viewed? Is it getting favorited? Is it getting purchased? Because Etsy obviously loves new listings. That's how it stays relevant. It wants to ensure that its customers always have access to newer listings. So, through this intricate feedback loop, Etsy will decide whether or not to rank your listing, and you will start getting traction and getting more and more sales or not, or you'll start getting pushed down the ranking pages and get lost in the sea of no traffic. So, overall, the goal here, your number one goal in understanding how to gain more traffic and how to gain more views is understanding what shoppers actually want. And I know it sounds very simplistic, but it really is. Like, there's no magic wand here. You need to look at data and you need to understand what to put in front of your customers. You need to understand what has potential to get sales because not all keywords and niches are created equal. And again, this is why personally I don't like to look at Etsy as niches and keywords, but understand it through the demand lens because that's what's going to help me create an irresistible listing. So you have to leverage Etsy's already existing customer base and understand what shoppers want. And I want you to write this down because I know it sounds very simplistic, but really that's what it comes down to. That's the foundation of you being successful, understanding these two key elements. So you don't need Etsy ads or posting on social media or on Pinterest because Etsy shoppers are actively looking to buy items. And it's fairly simple. If they're not buying your item, unless you have horrible SEO, but very rarely does that happen. Most folks have decent SEO, right, when they get started. And it's just a matter of understanding first how to start getting traction by really surfing the Etsy algorithm, right? Etsy is a marketplace, but it's a very different marketplace than selling on TikTok, Facebook ads, and Amazon because it's a different demographic. That's also the other elephant in the room that a lot of people don't talk about. Completely different demographic, different set of user, different set of shoppers. So overall, the incentive or what people usually do when starting out, myself included, by the way, I'm just as guilty, is that you end up going for low competition niches. But in reality, what you have to do is think differently and you have to go where the demand is. So look at Mother's Day as a keyword, right? There's too much competition. So your first instinct is like, okay, wow, too much competition. Let me not go into this niche. However, let me go and create a listing for Bonus Mom. But the problem with Bonus Mom is that there's not enough traffic. So meaning there's not enough people searching for that term. And as a matter of fact, probably not enough people actually purchasing that item. And while there could be opportunity to get sales with Bonus Mom, I'm going to show you the difference. So I've learned to stop caring about saturation. I don't care about saturation because what saturation tells me is that there's actually money to be made. Saturation means money. So there's this misconception out there, especially when getting started on business. And actually, this is something that is taught in business school because I remember taking a business class back in the day when I was in uni. And overall, what it taught us is that saturation was a bad thing. And so there's red ocean versus blue ocean. And ideally, you want to do blue ocean. But what they failed to tell us, we would say that Tesla, Elon Musk, he's in the blue ocean zone. However, Elon Musk has really deep pockets and he's able to invest millions, billions of dollars into this new industry, right? And obviously, there's always like a fine line, but when there's saturation, we know that there's potential. Now, the hard part is understanding consumer behaviors in order to differentiate yourself, being in touch with demand, being in touch with trends, understanding what are people into overall, right? People have been selling apparel t-shirts for hundreds of years, and yet people are still making millions of dollars selling apparel t-shirt. So it's understanding the nuances of each of your different shoppers, right? Understanding the nuances. And we'll talk more about that on day 2. But look at this difference here. So personalized stepmother gift, right? Which is Bonus Mom. Now, $5,000 is great as a beginner, right? However, can you look at the stark difference between these two products who are less saturated and have less competition versus these products who are saturated? Notice how majority of the sales and the traffic is coming from these saturated niches. So, which is why you might be like, okay, great, but then how do I differentiate myself if it's the saturated niches, right? So that's where things become a little harder. Like, because one thing is to understand where the traffic is coming from. The next is understanding how to create a listing that is going to be irresistible enough for your customers. So before we talk about any of that, for today, I want to make sure that I provide you with bite-sized information that you can actually take action and start implementing versus overwhelming you with too much information. Your number one goal is to understand what customers are actively buying. What are they actively buying? This is going to be your homework. You're going to find 3 successful Etsy stores and you're going to identify their best sellers. So to find 3 successful Etsy store, I want you to make sure that they have at least 5,000 sales, that they've had at least 5,000 sales in 1 year, especially when it comes to jewelry. So 5,000 sales in 1 year, depending on whatever category you want to sell in, it'll have to depend, right? Like depending on the price point that they're selling for and depending on the product category. So if they're selling digital products, I would say at least 10,000 sales and more. So identify their best sellers, and then you're going to identify their best selling niches. So there's 2 ways that you can do that. The first one is by using Alora.io. Please use my affiliate link if you're going to use them. But by doing something as simple as using their Chrome extension, you can get competitive insights of a store. And I want you to look at some of their top 5 bestsellers and then identify what niches they're going after, right? Based on the revenue that each of these different items have brought in. Another way to do this is by simply doing a quick search on Etsy by using the filter star seller. So you could do best-selling t-shirt, then do star seller, and then you would change in the bar, instead of star, you're going to change it to bestseller. Then click on a t-shirt that's a bestseller to identify a store, look at the store, and then from the store, just identify all their bestsellers. Now you can also identify or do competitive analysis using eRank, Everbee, Laura is one of my favorites. So either way, right? Or you could do it organically through Etsy if you don't have a research tool yet. The purpose here is for you to identify what these bestsellers are for one store only. Well, 3 different stores, but identify the bestsellers of all these different stores that you are looking at, because that's going to give you insights as to what is actually generating sales and what to go after, right? That's level 1. That's the first step. And so once you've done with this first challenge, tomorrow we're going to talk about how you can attract ready to buy customers and how to create this irresistible listing. But step 1 for today is for you to understand where the opportunities are. And I don't want you to rely on keywords. What I want you to do instead is do a competitive analysis based on what is getting the most sales. All right, guys. Well, this was fun. Keep me posted on your progress. I will see you tomorrow and we'll go over how to attract ready to